Yeah, and welcome back to the Metalheads Manifesto. We are doing our very first live episode. We're both live on YouTube and Twitch, and we're here with Hunted in the chat. Yeah, we're going into something I know nothing about. We're going into a Five Nights at Freddy's video. It's Kai's topic, so I'm going to let him lead into it past that point. But yeah, I'm Makai. That's Kai over there, and
Yeah, basically, when it comes to Five Nights at Freddy's stuff, I mean, most people that are especially younger, know a lot about the franchise and a lot about the characters, especially the one in question with the video that I sent you that I want to talk about this evening,
mm-hmm.
um, which is the primary antagonist of the entire series for the most part. And it's a demand given here in this by a guy that owns a community where they talk about it, where he refuses to let them talk about it like this because he doesn't, he will not see it this way. And uh, I'm sure you're familiar enough, at least, to know that the premise is kids were dealt with in some very bad ways in a restaurant, just to put it as
Mm-hmm.
censored as I can.
Yep.
So, and what this is talking about the character with, as a character specifically, more or less, rather than what they have or haven't done and things of that nature. And since it's, I guess, the Halloween month, we can talk about a horror game and
Yeah, we
its
should do a
community
whole
and see
bunch
what.
of them, I would say. I say we should do a lot of
Yeah.
Halloween stuff, like a lot of horror stuff, man. Like the next one,
Oh
for
yeah.
me, from what I'm thinking, like we might do some nice, closer to like movie stuff, man. You know, go into some classic horror movies and go through some shit.
And I
But
will
yeah,
go ahead before we get this started, though, and I will say, as far as it goes, this could be, as people like to say nowadays, a little triggering for some people about the topic at hand.
why? What's
It's
the
not
topic
an
at hand?
SA thing; it's a CA thing.
See anything? I'm sorry, I'm not. I don't know the
I
abbreviation.
don't know if that term is censored or not, but basically hurting kids.
Oh shit. Okay. Yeah, no, that's not prohibited. That's not allowed. Like you can. I think in this context we can talk about it, but in terms of like, generally
Yeah,
speaking,
we're
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
we
we're
kind
talking
of,
about something that
yeah,
exists rather than saying anything, so it might be.
yeah. Like whenever it comes to stuff like
But
this, we kind of have to like dodge around it a little
that's
bit,
why
I would
I'm
imagine.
that's
So
why I'm trying to do that a little
yeah,
bit without even saying it myself.
I got you. Yeah, I would never mind.
But
I know what you mean by CA. I know what the acronym is. I'd say using abbreviations is smart. I would say so as well, Hunted. I think
I
you're
do
right.
not believe that he uses very many abbreviations in this video. I
That's
will
okay.
forewarn.
It's just a video we're reacting to. There's nothing we can. It's not me saying it. It's not you saying it. It's none of us who are live saying it. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
this is
Hunted, by
like,
all means, since you're here with us, you can give your take on it too, and we'll talk with you as well.
mm-hmm.
See
Yeah.
what you
It,
think.
the same with anybody. Like the next time we do one of these live ones, if you're around, it's going to happen like sporadically. It's never going to be like a thing where we know it's going to happen. But if you ever do it, feel free to pop in, ask questions, come join in on what we're talking about. It's always fun to have people.
Yep.
Anyway, anyways, how are we going to do this? Like, are we going to go for like a little bit and then pause it and talk about it, or because like 12 minutes is a lot to remember? That's what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
if you feel that there's a place that you want to pause and ask something, we can. But if I feel like there's a place that I need you to pause, I'll tell you. We'll
Sounds
do
good.
it that way.
Yep, sounds good. So, man, we're gonna go and we're gonna see what this is about. I'm going in blind, like I said previously. So let's go. Let's see.
I wanted to
You at
take a
least know
break
the
from theory
premise.
videos for
Yep.
a second to talk about a bit of a serious topic in the Five Nights at Freddy's community. That, if you use Twitter, you may have seen as a common discourse, that being the topic of will care. Now, whenever this discourse ends up coming up, it usually
What is a Wilka? Before we get
Well,
into
will
this.
care is basically translated into what he had the title of the video is. It's basically that William Afton, being the main antagonist, cared about one or more of the three children that he had, but was also a person that specifically targeted children for what he was doing.
Okay.
And so it's saying that he's not, it's people trying to say that he is not a 100% complete monster,
Oh, I got you.
but he is still a very bad guy.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, let's go.
Usually ends up leaving a bunch of people confused, as will care is often used as an umbrella term in the community, and the ways that it's described by others in the community tend to be different from other definitions. I mean, the concept is William cared about his kids, right? Well, despite how straightforward that idea might sound, it's actually pretty nuanced and has left a lot of people in the community feeling excluded or confused why those concepts are demonized in the community, and most notably why I refuse to let the discussion of this idea happen in the Better FNaF Twitter community. First, let me be clear, believing in this idea and promoting it are two very different things. People in this community are quick to attribute malice to which is usually ignorance, and no one should be mocked or ridiculed for being tricked by a character who has been shown to be a manipulator. Rather, this video is an attempt to educate others on why this idea is so despised, so you can get a better understanding as well as not get confused with any other interpretations. So, in order to clear the air, I'm giving you the definitive as straightforward explanation of will care definition that can be made. And that going forward will be what will care means, and all other forms need to be renamed to prevent confusion. Will care refers to the idea that William Afton in the Five Nights at Freddy's games is shown to fatherly care for one or more of his children. Breaking this down, let's start with in the FNaF games. This refers to the events we actually see take place in the games from its earliest point, that being either the FNaF 4 minigames or Midnight Motorist depending on who you ask. In the FNaF 4 minigames, Afton makes no attempt to stop Michael from taking Dave to Fred.
Give me 1 sec, I need to go back and listen to that again.
Yeah.
He spoke so fucking quickly in that 1 bit.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have when you get back to that after he starts talking about Midnight Motor, the
Okay.
whole thing, the Dave thing. Stop after that because I got something for that.
Okay. Definition that can be made, and that going forward,
like he went, so he went means, like he was like speaking so fast from his head that
need to be renamed to prevent confusion. Will care refers to the idea that William Afton in the Five Nights at Freddy's games is shown to fatherly care for one or more of his children. Breaking this down, let's start with in the FNaF games. This refers to the events we actually see take place in the games from its earliest point, that being either the FNaF 4 minigames or Midnight Motorist depending on who you ask. In the FNaF 4 minigames, Afton makes no attempt to stop Michael from taking Dave to Fredbear's, despite Dave making it apparent he doesn't feel comfortable around.
I got you. Okay. Make a little bit of say. What did you have to say?
Now, even though he's made no attempt, that is true, to stop this from happening, William Afton owns half of that restaurant. So it would not normally be a thing that he would have, on any circumstances, probably barred his children from going to it at any, like, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
He's went out of his way at one point to tell his daughter not to go near the animatronics because they were dangerous. He has told this child, that the Dave child that they're mentioning here, before the child died, that he'd find a way to put him back together. In other words, find a way to get his memories and essence and stuff to be rebuilt in some way. But he didn't plan for these animatronics to kill his own children. That was not part of the plan that he had.
I mean, it's a pretty fucked up plan if that was his plan. I'm just saying. Like, if you planned for your own animatronics to kill your own children, either you're extremely fucked up in the head, or something went dangerously wrong, which I'm assuming it's the latter. So.
And also, I mean, the whole reason he went on a tirade to begin with on killing people had a lot more to do with what had happened with the instance that he's actually trying to talk about right here, as to the fact that he made no effort to stop them from going. It was the aftermath of this that actually caused a lot of those things to take place.
Mm-hmm.
So we can continue with what he's saying, though, and give him more context, too. But
yep, we can see what like connotations and context, because from what I can see, from what you said so far, it's like a like the Pinhead, like debacle, where in Pinhead's mind, what he does is pleasure. It's like the highest form of pleasure. But to us, it's torture and it's pain and it's death, but to him, it's different. It's just circumstance and how you look at things, and that's what I'm getting from it. I don't know how close that is, but just from 2 minutes into this video. Anyways,
Yes.
let's see.
Let's start with in the FNaF games. This refers to the events we actually see take place in the games from its earliest point, that being either the FNaF 4 minigames or Midnight Motors, depending on who you ask. In the FNaF 4 minigames, Afton makes no attempt to stop Michael from taking Dave to Fredbear's, despite Dave making it apparent he doesn't feel comfortable around the animatronics at this location. Willcare also tends to run with Will Plush, as William is trying to convince Dave to stay away from the animatronics because they're dangerous. But if this were the case, why would he not then stop Michael for bringing Dave to this location in the first place with dangerous machines? Not to mention, host the young boy's birthday at this very location where William is completely absent. Neglect is a common form of parental abuse, which means William does not care about Dave. Some of you may have a comment on that, but hold it for a second, as there is a reason I mention this. Say William, before the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 4's minigames, was a normal father who loved his children, but after something happened to him, like say getting spring locked, led to him snapping and no longer caring about his kids. Is this considered willcare? No, as we don't know the dynamic between William and his family before any of the events shown in the games, making these neutral ideas, no different than when people tried to talk about Mrs. Afton being relevant. However, by that same cloth, this wouldn't technically be a theory, as there's no evidence to actually determine whether or not anything happened before the FNaF 4 minigames, making it more in line with a headcanon and technically allowed in better...
Yes, okay.
Yeah. But with what he just said there, since you can't say that it was one way or another before the games took place, that means that you also can't there again say that it was not one way or another before the games took place either.
That's true. It's a catch-22. It's not stated here or there, so you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. It's kind of what you think, I think. That might be purposeful. A lot of that type of stuff is purposefully done to make people think about the lore and to add your own little spin onto it, what you think, which creates discussions and topics and communities and that type of stuff, which is exactly what this is doing. So.
And that is the business model that Scott Cawthon, which is the game developer, used for this. The community's figured out a lot of the story that he has hidden in little places here and there and talked about it. And this isn't a story that is, it's not like an RPG story or anything like that, or even, I don't even know, or
it's
even
more
a
like
standard
Elden Ring.
adventure.
It's more like Elden Ring, where you have to find it for yourself. It's not given to you. You have to literally go around the world and find little bits and pieces and put that together to make what is the lore of the game, I would say.
Yes, and he has came out before and deliberately said when people were so off the beaten path on being wrong that there was no way that they shouldn't continue going down that particular rabbit hole.
That's good.
So he has closed off certain doors, but he has not said nothing about this.
Yes. With it maybe getting more blown up, he may come out and deny it, straight out, but honestly, it depends, I guess. I need to see more about it to really know exactly what they're saying, I guess it's more, is it the catch-22 of, he wanted his kids dead, or he didn't want his kids dead, is what we're going into, I'm assuming.
Well, this guy, the way he's doing it, it's not, it don't sound like either one of them as we get further in his video to me. But this is where we'll have differences, maybe of opinions based on what he's saying, just because we're two different people with two different perspectives on what we know about this and just the world in general.
Yeah.
But
I'm gonna try to add more of my life experience into it, whereas you can go more towards the game lore, because that's that makes the most sense to me. So. Okay, let's go a bit further and see. Let's go back a little bit.
Events of Five Nights at Freddy's 4's minigames, was a normal father who loved his children, but after something happened to him, like say getting spring locked, led to him snapping and no longer caring about his kids. Is this considered willcare? No, as we don't know the dynamic between William and his family before any of the events shown in the games, making these neutral ideas, no different than when people tried to talk about Mrs. Afton being relevant. However, by that same cloth, this wouldn't technically be a theory, as there's no evidence to actually determine whether or not anything happened before the FNaF 4 minigames, making it more in line with a headcanon and technically allowed in Better FNaF Twitter, as it does not ignore the abuse William put Dave through during the gameplay, and suggests that William is a bad person by the time we see him in the games. Now, to pick
Can I just say, the dude needs a pop filter on his microphone, man. Holy shit. So.
Technically allowed in Better FNaF Twitter, as it does not ignore the abuse William put Dave through during the gameplay, and suggests that William is a bad person by the time we see him in the games. Now, to pick up where I cut you off, does abusing someone mean that you care about them? Well, this is where I specified fatherly love. Fatherly cared, as this was an argument I actually made when I believed in a form of will care. In media, there is a popular trope of authority figures making abusive decisions for characters with their motive being them caring for them, but this is objectively false, and a pretty two-dimensional way of viewing the situation. What said person cares about is often actually the idea, potential, or public image of the person in question, disregarding their actual feelings on the situation, which caring with any form of love would not permit. This is where the idea of twisted will care, or now renamed to Afton objects, idea comes from. The idea that William did care for his children, but not as a father, but rather as an owner. He viewed his children as test subjects, pawns he could bend and mold to his.
Oh shit, we're going Full Metal Alchemist, man. That's where we're going. If you know the scene I'm talking about in Full Metal Alchemist, you know where you have that scientist, professor, whatever his name is, and he experiments on his daughter and turns it into that dog creature. And, he kind of combines the two together, and that becomes like what his daughter became. Like, it's kind of like that, isn't it? That's where he's going with it.
It sounds that way, yes. But it's just he's already put his own foot in his mouth with this right here, and this is the biggest thing that I had a big problem with. Okay. He's already made the commentary that this makes William Afton, a description of him, as two-dimensional as it can be. And that is the problem. When you have a character that's a third-dimensional character, that means there's more to them than just what you're seeing and what they show you on the screen.
Yeah.
There's background stuff to it. There's even characters in the games that reference Afton as a former friend of theirs. So he is not all complete psychotic serial killer like you would see in a horror slasher film. He is a person, which means he's written as a three-dimensional character, not a 2D character.
Well, I mean, in order to be psychopathic, generally you don't have friends. It's normally one of the main tropes of psychopathy, where you have acquaintances at the max, and you exist to exist. You don't exist for friends or for people or to have kids, or some do. I mean, it's happened, I would imagine. So imagine some serial killers have had kids, but I can't imagine them having love in that process. It's not a part of who they are. So from him to have actual friends who can remember him and say, "This was my friend," it makes me think he's not psychotic in that way.
Yeah, but that's one thing that I've been upset that got, well, not upset, but got me kind of wheels turning about this particular video was when you start talking about things in when you narrow it down to 2 dimensions, you're deliberately omitting things that you shouldn't be, especially when the characters have never been portrayed in any way that says that it's just black and white. There's a gray area with all these characters.
Even the animatronics, do they have a grey area as well? Curiously.
They do.
That's interesting. We'll need to go more into that as we keep going through, but let's keep going through the video. We can talk about other stuff afterwards.
Yes, that's why I'm trying not to deviate too far.
Yeah.
The idea of twisted will care, or now renamed to Afton objects, idea comes from. The idea that William did care for his children, but not as a father, but rather as an owner. He viewed his children as test subjects, pawns he could bend and mold to his will, accessories to make him seem better than Henry, which is why he would try to make sure they didn't die, like telling Elizabeth to stay away from baby, despite not watching her or preventing her from going to the sister location at all. He gave minimal effort, wanting his children to obey him like pets and not as human beings. as well as the nuance of William's feelings for Mrs. Afton or Henry, which seems complicated given one we never actually see, therefore we're incapable of knowing his feelings for his wife, and Henry, who he's shown to both love and despise, and likely this love, just like for his kids, is actually out of the idea of who Henry is, envious of what he has and the life he's achieved, trying to replicate it for himself and show Henry up. And none of these are a form of will care. And lastly, when these arguments happen, there's always that one person who mentions how William could hate one or two of his children, but still care.
Can I just mention, if you're arguing with somebody in the sense that he's describing, it means you care for that person. You wouldn't argue with somebody you didn't give a singular fuck about. You wouldn't even, you know, begin to, like, even want to do that, you know, because, like, the reason why you argue is because you have a difference of opinion, but it's also because you have some level of like or care or, you know, like, that kind of way, especially when it's a wife or a loved one or a child or, you know what I mean.
Yeah, because you get upset that your opinion is being shot down, and you want your opinion to be accepted, and that's what causes the argument, usually.
Exactly, usually. So yeah, that was just my little point for that, but anyways, let's go.
Away from baby, despite not watching her or preventing her from going to the sister location at all. He gave minimal effort, wanting his children to obey him like pets and not as human beings, as well as the nuance of William's feelings for Mrs. Afton or Henry, which seems complicated given one we never actually see, therefore we're incapable of knowing his feelings for his wife, and Henry, who he's shown to both love and despise, and likely this love, just like for his kids, is actually out of the idea of who Henry is, envious of what he has and the life he's achieved, trying to replicate it for himself and show Henry up. And none of these are a form of will care. And lastly, when these arguments happen, there's always that one person who mentions how William could hate one or two of his children, but still care for the others. But I'm sorry to burst your bubble, the evidence flat out tells us he doesn't care about any of them. We've already showed how he hated Dave, and if it wasn't obvious, he obviously doesn't care that much for Mike, as in certain interpretations, he either suggests he's going to abuse either Dave or Mike in Midnight Motorist, whoever the runaway is. It suggested either one of his two sons are put inside of the nightmare chambers to fight off against the mannequins while being drugged, enough to cause Mike to have nightmares about it years later, convinces Mike to go down to the Sea Bear bunker knowing full well the animatronics would kill him in some way, shape, or form. If Mike is the fright guard, he attacks Mike during the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 3, and in FFPS, he not only attacks Mike, but also flat out mocks the dude, mentioning how that was easier than I thought it would be. Real caring father of the year, dude. And then we have Elizabeth, who, from her introduction, is told to shove off, despite being dragged to the circus over and over and over again, with William knowing full well they were programmed to kidnap kids. When she was killed, instead of giving up and turning himself in, he covers up the incident with nightmare gas and instead conducts experiments on his daughter instead of trying to set her soul free. In fact, given the blueprints for the scooper mentioning how fire can potentially kill Remnant, he knew fully well there was a way to give his daughter a way to pass on, to have her no longer be forced to stay in this world, and rather, in her auditorium is shown to have a shock pad, suggesting she was shocked.
Let's go ahead and stop that for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that being said, he's saying it would be caring of someone in a horror franchise. I mean, he's not looking at it once again from the material that we're looking. He's looking at it from a real world scenario, and this ain't even a bad way to. It's a bad way to look at it for a real world scenario.
He's not even looking at it from a real world scenario. Technically, even the bit about like how he didn't even let his daughter's soul free or whatever to that degree. Like, I imagine as a parent, like, I wouldn't know. I'm not, like, you know, I don't have biological kids, but I know you do. So,
Yes.
So, like, I imagine if your daughter or son or whoever was trapped in this world, it would be heartbreaking for you to set them free, because it would be like killing them over again in that way.
Yeah. So you see what happens in this franchise, as you probably know, children have come across a very unfortunate ending of some sort or another, and then they wind up inhabiting the animatronics specifically,
Mhm.
and they haunt them. That's what happens in this franchise. And the remnant stuff that he's talking about is the same thing as it's a way of combining the human soul with liquid metal. So it's literally nothing more than a storytelling device. And it's used to help with the possession process for the animatronics after he figures out how to do that. He doesn't know how to do that for a long time and doesn't even know the animatronics could be possessed until his daughter was killed by Baby. And then he knows because she possesses the animatronic known as Circus Baby.
Makes sense.
And then he starts figuring out more that could happen based off of that.
So from that point, does he begin to like purposefully make them into, like he chooses the kids that haunt the puppets?
Yeah, he initially picks kids for experimental purposes to try to figure out how it happens, like how the possession works, what it does. Because the Dave kid that they've talked about died before Elizabeth did, supposedly according to the storyline. This is still no one really knows the exact true answer to this question at this moment because it hasn't been brought up in a way that's definitive from Scott. So the generally believed thing is that Dave died first, then it was Elizabeth. And after he figured out that robots could be possessed by souls, he was trying to figure out, well, maybe he could bring his son back in some way, which was killed by being put inside of a animatronic's mouth by the other brother of that family, being Mike, which was the oldest kid, as a prank. And then the prank went horribly wrong because the bear's mouth snapped shut on the kid's head.
Oh, damn. Okay. Makes sense. So what you're saying is that what actually happened is the complete opposite of what this dude is saying. So instead of like him hating his kids, he tried everything in his power to bring back his kids. Like, once it happened to his daughter, he tried to bring back his son. If he hated his kids, he would never do that. Like, it wouldn't be a thing.
Yeah, and the biggest thing about it is, yes, he goes through some very unredeemable methods to do this. That's not sugarcoat that. There's no excusing the methods that he had used.
No, but
from a science.
So good.
Go ahead.
But like in terms of him, like in terms of like categorically saying he hated his children, even I can't say it. Like, just like judging by that little bit of law right there, no person who hates a person will ever bring them back in that way. I don't think.
No, I don't believe so either. And the biggest things about that, I mean, yes, he did target children for his targets, but he was also trying to bring children back. So even though it's not written, I could just as easily say and be probably close to right that he thought that children had to be children because that was the best way to test what he wanted to do.
That's true. I mean, like, for him, he needed his own kids. So what would be the point of choosing an adult or somebody who's older? Because or even I don't know how old the child is, obviously, but at the same time, it's like, if you're gonna test something because you need something to work, you test it on the group you need, right? You don't test like you won't test like something that works on females, mostly on males, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, and I believe that they don't ever truly say, but they're preteen children that he lost.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's the most fucked up like ratio that's being used, basically.
Yeah,
I got you. Interesting. I mean, like, just from like this little bit, I can see how this video is a little bit backwards, just from the little bits that we've spoken about. But anyway,
told to shove off, despite being dragged to the circus over and over and over again, with William knowing full well they were programmed to kidnap kids. When she was killed, instead of giving up and turning himself in, he covers up the incident with nightmare gas and instead conducts experiments on his daughter instead of trying to set her soul free. In fact, given the blueprints for the scooper mentioning how fire can potentially kill Remnant, he knew fully well there was a way to give his daughter a way to pass on, to have her no longer be forced to stay in this world, and rather, in her auditorium is shown to have a shock pad, suggesting she was shocked to the point that the button doesn't even work anymore. And William just ended up abandoning her inside of the bunker for years. And when she does manage to escape and show up at the FFPS location, he makes no attempt to communicate with her, letting her believe that he was the one who brought them all together, and then UCN flat out having her say William forgot about her. And this is simply the evidence shown inside the game's continuity. Don't get me started on the movie or The Fourth Closet, which both show the Afton daughters being used as pawns by their fathers while being told they're not enough and that everything was their faults, resulting in one dying and him not caring.
It's made it abundantly clear that the game lore, book lore, and movie lore are not intertwined and connected. They're separate continuities.
Okay, so they're like different parallel universes, is what you say.
Yeah.
I got you. Okay, that's one thing to make note of. But if this person is trying to say not include, like not to even mention these things, it means he doesn't know what he's talking about, I would say.
And to be fair, I could have shot him down again before, because Remnant is a book concept. It's never mentioned one time in the games.
That's interesting.
In the games, it's just a good old-fashioned Halloween horror haunting story. It's nothing more.
So he's combining the lore of 3 different parallel universes and trying to make a theory, basically. From what we'll say.
But you can't do when the creator said it doesn't work that way.
Pretty much. I mean, if the dude who wrote it or made it, whichever way, man, it's like, nah, this isn't how this works, then obviously you're talking out of your ass. But anyways.
Shocked to the point that the button doesn't even work anymore. And William just ended up abandoning her inside of the bunker for years. And when she does manage to escape and show up at the FFPS location, he makes no attempt to communicate with her, letting her believe that he was the one who brought them all together, and then UCN flat out having her say William forgot about her. And this is simply the evidence shown inside the game's continuity. Don't get me started on the movie or The Fourth Closet, which both show the Afton daughters being used as pawns by their fathers while being told they're not enough and that everything was their faults, resulting in one dying and him not caring, rather calling her not enough, and stabbing the other while giving her a look to make her feel guilty, doubling down on trying to make it seem like it was her fault. No matter the continuity, William hates all of his kids, and shown to only like his characters, the characters he brings to life by killing the kids in all of the continuities. In fact, if Michael being an Afton has any merit in the movies, it would also suggest William knew Mike was his son and still tried to kill him. So, with all the evidence on the table, Willcare, by the definition I've given out, not only evidently is wrong, but also requires you to ignore or justify the abuse William has put his children through. Not to mention, promoting such ideas creates 2 mindsets within the community, that being parents in the fandom considering the treatment of their children in this sort of way, that being neglecting them, and other forms of abuse. But you know, they love their children, so it's okay, right? The other mindset is that it can cause victims assuming that just because someone is family or their friends, etc., that they must love them, and that any form of abuse is done to them, such as William does to his kids.
I mean, that's proven wrong just in terms of logic. Like, there's people who have been beaten to death by their parents. There's people who have been, like, disfigured, fucked up every conceivable way by their parents. It, in no way, shape, or form does it imply that just because somebody is a parent, that they have to love you. That there's no way that that's ever implied in life, man. But still.
And not only that, even going off of that, at what point do you consider neglect? I mean, what point do you consider that? I mean, like, for example, if you're saying people about doing neglect stuff, I mean, nowadays we leave our kids most of the time with their own entertainment devices. We're not coddling them all the time and parading them off to do things. I
Well,
mean,
like,
but
back in
we
our
still
day, we
feed
spent
them.
most of the time outside. So, like, back in, say, the
Yeah.
90s, early 2000s, at least for me. Like, we was always out. We was always out with our friends doing stuff. So I would say it was probably, like, not neglectful for us, but, like, because we spent so much time away from our parents that we never really had that, like, how everybody's inside on their iPads or consoles or phones or, whatever they are. Like, I think it's just generational. So this generation is very much into their technology. That doesn't depend on what the next generations are going to be. I think it's all, every generation has its own form of neglect in that way.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that I I'm the character for William Afton, he's a robotics engineer.
Hmm.
Nowhere in that's the only thing we know about him in terms of what he did for a living. We don't know how demanding that job is as to far as for him to not be around most of the time.
It's a
He's never seen in game unless he's the villain.
That makes sense.
But we don't know how long designing and producing these machines take him to do.
I would imagine because I studied electronic engineering as an example. I know how hard it is to code machine code and to get it right and to do those things. But to actually
Mhm.
make the machine and to actually do that on top of it, the programming alone is enough to drive somebody crazy. Not crazy, but like it's a very demanding part of it. Never mind inventing and everything else on top of it. So
And before we go on, yes, I'm sure somebody out there will say, yeah, the Funtime animatronics were designed with compartments in them specifically for abducting children.
yeah.
Yes, the Funtime animatronics were designed for that purpose. But the original run of animatronics that were at Fredbear's Family Diner were not designed with that feature.
So it means only once he realized they could trap souls in them is when he decided to um like put his plan into motion. Should we say?
That's what the game evidence suggests. Yes.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Anyway, I mean, so for me, this so far is pointing towards there is some level of care towards his kids. Yes, maybe you have the point where he may have abandoned the animatronic of his daughter, but then again, there could be reasons behind that we don't know, or any
I,
number
I,
of
I,
things that.
Sorry, I will get into that when we get to the end of this as
Yeah.
for why that would have been because it's not. It requires branching off too far from the video to talk about it.
Okay, sure. We'll go into it at the end. It will be totally fine. Anyway,
It's wrong, but
we're only
also
8 minutes
requires
in,
you to
of like a
ignore or
12-minute video.
justify the abuse William has put his children through. Not to mention, promoting such ideas creates two mindsets within the community, that being parents in the fandom considering the treatment of their children in this sort of way, that being neglecting them, and other forms of abuse. But they love their children, so it's okay, right? The other mindset is that it can cause victims assuming that just because someone is family or their friends, etc., that they must love them, and that any form of abuse is done to them, such as William does to his kids. So it's okay, because you love them, right? Both of these concepts are dangerous and will lead to real people getting hurt, especially given how young and impressionable this community happens to be. And the rebuttal of, bro, it's just a story, they're fictional, doesn't excuse the ideas or principles, as it still shows the morality of the theorist promoting the idea. That, or blaming Scott for writing such a character, which, to be flat out honest, if that's the direction that Scott takes the character after showing how abusive he is, to simply flip his concept on its head and attempt to make the community empathize with the child murderer would make me question Scott's morality. And I'm sorry to tell you this, Better FNaF Twitter and other places just would no longer exist because I would ultimately leave the Five Nights at Freddy's community. After all, the bullying and abuse
Community would exist, you just wouldn't be a part of it. So, anyway.
Concept on its
He
head,
owns it.
an attempt to make the community
Sorry,
empathize
just
with
one
the
little bit
child
on its
murderer
fault.
would make me question Scott's morality. And I'm sorry to tell you this, Better FNaF Twitter and other places just would no longer exist because I would ultimately leave the Five Nights at Freddy's community. After all, the bullying and abuse in the series so far has been overtly shown as a bad thing and never encouraged, whereas making William a victim would suggest Scott wants the character to seem redeemable, which, newsflash, a child murderer is not. And being completely honest, I don't care what anyone thinks. The Better FNaF Twitter community is mine. I make the rules, and I don't think it's that much of an ask not to promote an idea that defends a child murderer and, in some arguments, victim blames. Theorists who think this is okay have no business interacting with me or my community, as I refuse to let the younger parts of the Better FNaF Twitter community end up getting hurt because I allowed these ideas to exist in my community. I have never stopped in.
It's say if it says private community, yeah, like yes, but at the same time you're neglecting free speech at that same time. So like you're
Well, he's
neglecting. Plus, like you can also argue that what he's theorizing here isn't 100% accurate. Just some things we've already mentioned throughout this podcast already. So
yes. And once again, like he's already said, if Scott was to come out and just to simply say that before the events of the games that William was a normal, loving, caring, as everyone would imagine, human being, he would just quit the franchise.
Hunted said this guy is just mad about some dumb shit, and now he's reaching hard to bend things his way, which I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a stretch on a lot of it. Because he's really banking on that two-dimensional identity. He's not wanting to even allow the possibility of there being a gray area.
No, I mean, like, yes, like you can't forgive a child murder, right? Like, but
You
this
can't.
dude isn't written like Freddy Krueger, where the parents burnt him to death and then he became a part of children's dreams, right? He's not that character. He's written differently. He's written in a place from, I wouldn't say sympathy because that's not really his character, but I would say it's more of a, you can tell there's love there. As fucked up and as backward as his morality is, there is something there that is humanizing about him. It's not a lot, but there's something written into it.
Like the situation with how he was conceived and all, about his mother being thrown into that locked into that room with all them the 100 maniacs deal, and how all that had happened and occurred.
Yeah, I wouldn't know
That's
about any
their
of that. So
Well, his mother was a nun, and she was at basically a prison ward or psychiatric ward, one of the damn two. I can't remember which one of the two it is, but she was locked in a room with 100 insane criminals, and things happened, and that's how Freddy was conceived.
oh, okay, I got you. Yeah, that would make sense.
So that's their way of trying to explain why he's so screwed up and make
Yeah,
you sympathize with the fact of how he came around.
yeah. I mean, you kind of have to do that for good. I wouldn't say good writing, but just for like kind of continuity's sake, there has to be something redeemable. Like a villain isn't a villain just because they're bad. Like there has to be something, in my opinion, redeemable about them in order for them to be a very good villain. Like,
Mhm.
speaking of villains, like even if you go into like say the most famous is the Joker, right? He has redeemable qualities. He just doesn't use them. Like I mean, there are things about him you can sympathize with throughout his entire existence, but at the same time, he does so much heinous shit that like his morality doesn't matter anymore because he's so fucked up.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, Afton doesn't have Joker quality storytelling to him,
No,
but he does have some pretty baseline horror movie tropes to him that we
yeah,
will get into.
yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, even just like some other like things that I'm seeing, I can definitely see. Like I said, Freddy Krueger influences in there. I can see even leading back to some anime trips in there. So like you look at the Full Metal Alchemist, that's almost like a 1-to-1 comparison with this. But anyways, let's finish this video. We got like 2 minutes.
As I refuse to let the younger parts of the Better FNaF Twitter community end up getting hurt because I allowed these ideas to exist in my community. I have never stopped anyone from expressing their ideas or theories in the community, but where I draw the line is when those theories can lead to actual people getting hurt. Frights being in continuity or a parallel isn't going to get someone hurt. When Follow Me takes place, whether that be 1988 or blah 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 in the timeline, it isn't going to get somebody hurt. If Afton is back or if the Mimic is Burntrap, it won't get somebody hurt. This idea can, and I refuse to give it a platform. Oh, I almost forgot. There was one other idea people got confused about when this debate is usually brought up. Alternate universes. What's going on with that? It has no place in the Better FNaF Twitter community. However, if it's requested, I wouldn't be against the idea of making a FNaF AU space for the discussion of this idea, assuming that it doesn't demonize children or defend an abuser. Take, for instance, the universe that Sh1zuh is from, where William was just a normal guy who, after his family was killed, made a deal with a really shady character in an attempt to bring them back. That's a perfectly valid interpretation. Or my
really
good
wish you'd get a
timeline where
pop
Henry
filter,
stopped
man. I
William
really
before he
fucking
killed
wish you-
Charlie, also perfectly valid. And a space for silly ideas like that would be nice. But Better FNaF Twitter is a community about Five Nights at Freddy's official like franchises, and unless you specified that you were referring to an alternate universe in every post that you make about this alternate
I mean, technically, he did in this one, Richard. But
universe, I wouldn't suggest that you try to use the idea
without
Community.
stating it anyway.
Anyway, that's the last time I plan on talking about this stupid idea ever again, and rest assured that it will never have a place in Better FNAF Twitter. And Better FNAF Twitter is going nowhere, and neither am I, so get comfortable. We're going to be seeing each other for a long time. Don't be stupid, don't let people get hurt, and I will see you all tomorrow with the originally planned video. Matane.
Interesting. Yeah, let me move that back.
So,
Yeah,
it's a
before I
long
let you
story.
go on to your long rant of probably what you have in store, but so for me, the fact that like you like, I'm gonna say it's like in the most simplest way. You can't fully like branch out that all children are good, because they're not. There have been children where not like, but in England that have killed little kids. Like, did you hear the story of like, I think they were like 8 and 10 and 12, and they murdered a toddler? Evil is evil, and age doesn't matter. You know what I mean? There are cases where children are like horrendously violent without any cause or reason, or so. Just the fact that like children are innocent, blanche statement, like there's like nothing to it, like is false. It's like you can't say that. It's not true. But yeah, anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, like you were saying, there's people like Mary Bell. Mary Bell is another child, was another child murder type deal. And there's all children can't be put in that way, but when it comes to this character, specifically this character, he has to be able to, since he's been around and done so many things, he almost has to be able to be allowed to be three-dimensional in this regard, because most of the, like I've been saying this whole time, most of the franchises showing three-dimensional sides of everything, so it would not make sense for the antagonist to be two-dimensional, or even, if you want to even go as far as to say it as a literary term, one-dimensional character. He shouldn't. He's not just one way. He has every opportunity to have been a normal person that devolved down into what he is.
Yeah.
Because that's really what his story is a normal person that became a bad person.
You're telling me he basically broke bad, is what you're saying?
Yeah. He isn't exactly in any way ever good, but back when it comes to the abandonment, since we're done with that video, him abandoning baby, a lot of that took place at a time to where William Afton also made a second set of suits that doubled as animatronics and doubled as wearable suits.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that they operated was you had this hand crank that you could use that would pull the animatronic pieces back to be locked behind what were known as spring locks, where a person could fit inside of the suit. And he used the Golden Rabbit character to do all of his murders that he did by turning it into suit mode, wearing the suit, luring kids off, and doing what he did.
Yeah.
When he started figuring out that the animatronics could be possessed, he started luring them to a room that their scanners couldn't find. They didn't know where that room was based on the blueprints they had in their CPUs of the building. And when they got there and they were confused because they couldn't keep going anywhere, because to them there was a wall there, but there was no wall there.
Mm-hmm.
But he'd come in, disassemble them to try to get whatever information he needed to get as to trying to still figure out why that they were possessed at the time. He did this with all the original animatronics. And then come back for the last night of it, and the ghosts of those children were no longer in their animatronics. They were actually in the room with him, and he was scared of them to the point where he got in that suit that's been sitting there for over 20 years. And it's been said in the games explicitly, even when the suits were in mint condition, that moisture, fast movements, anything of that nature that was anything sporadic could make those locks dislodge and force the suit back into animatronic mode.
Yeah.
So while he was in that suit, he thought that he was safe because that's what they saw. That's what the kids knew as their killer, what the thing that actually killed them, the monster, if you will, not just the man, but the actual monster.
Yeah.
So he got comfortable and he laughed for a moment, and the spring locks release,
hmm
and the animatronic parts literally slam into his body and impale him and go back into animatronic mode.
I mean, it couldn't happen to a
And
better
then he
person,
possesses,
in my opinion. But still.
and he possesses that suit after that point, where
Okay.
his dead, rotting carcass is still inside of it, but it's in animatronic mode.
Yeah, I got you. So he went full Power Ranger mode. Apart from that, the Zords literally destroyed him in the process. Is what you're saying? Yeah, I got you.
So that's why he, quote unquote, forgot about her, is because he was laying in a boarded up room for 30 years, dead.
Yeah. So we didn't forget he was dead inside of a room for like 30 odd years, and yeah, that makes sense.
Now, there's no guarantee that he remembers her
No.
in possessed mode, like when he's possessing her, but possessing the bunny animatronic. But so that statement could still be true that he forgot, but it's not like the man's he's not alive.
No.
So it's hard to say what he would or wouldn't remember.
It depends on how hauntings work, right? Like, because I imagine
Yes.
if they work something to the degree where you remember up to your death, then you might only have a memory of up to the last like few days before you got killed or before you were abducted, or might even just remember your abduction or just remember your death. Like, is it ever stated how much you know when you are possessed, or when you do die inside of the animatronic, when you do possess something? Is any of
Not
that
in
stated?
game, no. Not in game.
Okay.
There are elaborations to it when it comes to movie continuity, and there are some things with books, but we can't combine those things. If we combine one piece of it, we have to accept all of it.
Yeah, but that's not how
And
it's intended to be consumed. It's intended to be
right.
three separate entities, as you said so.
hmm Now, yes, sometimes Scott will take certain aspects from the books and put them into the game, such as at one point in time, William Afton was only known as the Purple Guy, and then he was in the books known as William Afton, and then that name transferred over to the games, but nothing more than that specifically transferred over with him.
Makes sense, but it just depends on what he wants to make lore within his specific entities. Because with a book, you can
Mhm.
add so much detail within. From what I've seen of the Five Nights at Freddy's games, they are, I wouldn't say simplistic, but they are very simple. Like, there's not a
Oh,
lot
they are.
to them, but like there's not a lot to them. Like, there isn't like a whole thing you're going through that has a lot of lore behind it. It's it's meant to be simple in its inception, so it's hard to put a lot of that lore into that. So you have to be very subtle with it, I would imagine. So
But I think the most damning thing, though, about this whole idea that this guy's come up with, because he's a supposed community leader for some kind of a theory crafting, is that he is demanding people not theorize of what Afton could have been like about his own children because of the actions that he took on other people's children. That's not even remotely considered a relatable thing.
no,
You can not like somebody else entirely and still like your own family just fine. I mean, it's not comparable
it's
in
not.
all reality.
No, that is like not a single. Me, I agree with you. I don't think that's ever comparable because, like, especially like if you just don't like people in general, you can like the people you're around. Like, if you live with somebody or you have your own kids, like that's different. Those people are related to you, or you choose to have them with you. But for everybody
Mm.
else, you could hate the world and only have a specific group that you enjoy being around, and that's totally fine. I don't see how that compares. Like, like you don't have to love kids. Like, apart from your own kids, you don't have to. It's not a requirement.
No. And demanding people not talk about it on his forum. I mean, he has that right to do
Yeah,
that, but
yeah, it does.
the way that he says that he's never been against people giving their own ideas, and then this idea, except for in this case, of it being things he feels that could hurt somebody. I don't. Maybe I'm looking at it from the wrong perspective, but I do not see how trying to say that Afton could have at one point been a good person or that he could still truly care about the children that he's lost
It's
could be bad.
leading on from that. Like it's like saying, do you believe Walter White was good at the start of Breaking Bad before he did anything? Would you believe he was a good person the rest of his life, the other 50 odd years before he got his cancer diagnosis? And
I
then
wouldn't probably, but
no, but he
I
was.
don't know.
He was a good person. He was a scientist. He looked after his family. He invented things. You know, he was a part of that big business that he walked away from. You know, he did a lot with his life. It was only in the later years of his life is when he became the evil, villain, heinous person that became Heisenberg and created a meth empire. And like, you know, it's that exact same thing. Like the only time when a good person or good person becomes a villain is when they do those heinous acts, is when their true nature is really revealed. So you can say every villain has goodness about them in that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's actually, now that I think about it more, I know it's not the same thing, so to speak, but that's the common trope in a lot of Final Fantasy things is that the villain most of the time used to be uh somebody that was highly respected in the world, and then something happens.
Yeah, that's Sephiroth to a T, isn't it? You know, in 7.
Yeah. Sephiroth, several other characters in that franchise are the same exact way.
Mhm.
Like Final Fantasy X, the main character's dad did the same thing the main character did years ago, and then winds up having to be the villain because the world makes him have to be the villain.
Makes
But
sense. But that's writing though. Like you can see how common this path to becoming a villain is. If you just look at like most media, you can see it's a very common trope that people do go down.
mhm.
So you can
I
see
mean,
where the writing is coming from. So good.
even Spider-Man could have easily became a villain if you go by the thing where he was first got his powers and tried to become a wrestler and stuff like that, and then he could have had one moment to potentially killed off the guy that shot his uncle.
Well, if you think about it, like Spider-Man's life has been one of the hardest lives you can live because he gets no
Mhm.
thanks for what he does. If you go by the comics, a lot of the Spider-Man's lore goes into him being depressed and a recluse, and the only thing he has is Spider-Man. You know, like he like loses Mary Jane, or you know he becomes lonely, or she dies, or you know there's like a whole bunch of different ways it happens. But you almost
Mm.
like they go into, I don't know if you've seen it, but where all the Spider-Man meet in like a different parallel universe, and they're all depressed, they're all sad, they're all fucked up in their own ways because every iteration of Spider-Man has been goes into a massive bout of depression over time. So
And back to what he was saying there about specifically Afton attacking Mike, because it's accepted that Michael Afton is the protagonist of Five Nights at Freddy's 3. I don't know if you've seen any of the jump scare animations for those games at all. Probably
not
have
really.
from videos that you've watched in the past, at least one or two anyway.
I probably seen them like a very long time ago now.
But if you compare any jump scare animation in that franchise to the Five Nights at 3 one, it does not look like William is trying to attack Michael. It looks like he's confused.
That's interesting.
I mean, I
Also,
don't know if you'd want to pull that up for people that want to see what I'm talking about, but it does. It looks more like he is confused more than he is just doing a than it's trying to kill you.
what am I searching for? Five Nights at
Spring trap jump scare.
uh,
Spring.
yeah.
It just looks like he's confused to me when it happened. I hope it's not very long for you.
Okay.
Oh, there it is.
Now it's like yeah.
It
It's
doesn't look
interesting.
like he's trying to kill him.
I need to go that way. There we go. That's the best way that I can put.
Yeah.
I know. No, he doesn't look like he's trying to get him. Like, he doesn't look like he's attacking him, if that makes sense. It doesn't look like
To
an
me, it
attack
don't.
to me. No, to me, it doesn't look like an attack. It's like he's just staring. You know, like he's not aggressive. Like, imagine a lot of
Like
the
he's
other
trying
ones are very aggressive in the way they are
Yeah,
shown.
even from that same game, if you went to look at any of the others, from the same exact game, you can see a distinctive difference between what he is doing right here and
Mhm.
what they do, and
Yeah.
that kinda helps with suggesting that he might just be slightly confused as far as why Michael's there,
Yeah. That's
or
true.
maybe he's remembering who he is. I don't really know, but
Possibly. Because we don't know how much memory he has in this either, so. Like we said, it's
now they do say
all so good.
they do say that he has, he does learn more when he rebuilds himself after this game. He remembers a lot of things,
Mhm.
but it's like in this particular one, he can't even talk because he's damaged to the point where he can't speak.
Yeah, I got you. So he's very much like very, very, very limited. So that would explain everything. That would totally rebut his point. You know, about him not remembering or not caring, or you know, because like if your memory is that, or your whole like being is that fucked up, I don't think it's unreasonable to think that you can't possibly do anything about it, even if you wanted to.
Mhm.
So
So, yeah, I mean, now once again, I'll never be saying that he did whatever he's done was excusable. It
no,
wasn't the right way to go about what he was trying to do, but I can look at him from, I guess maybe because I've done some writing on my own, I guess I could look at it from a where this is a villain arc, which means he had a three-dimensional side to himself, but we people only really focus on the negatives most of the time
that's true.
and don't even look for any of the positives.
I mean that's what a lot of people do though. A lot of people only see villains as evil. They don't see the I wouldn't say positives, but you know the bits that aren't evil. Like I've said this whole thing, man. Every villain has a light side. Every villain has that switch where they have that little bit of goodness inside of them. Like even Chucky, man. Look, Chucky when Chucky found his kid, right? He had that little bit of love inside of him to have his kid, and then like
Even Chucky.
exactly.
Even
So
Chucky.
yep,
And he spent most of his movies trying to kill an 11-year-old boy.
exactly. Like so, even if Chucky has redeemable qualities, then obviously it's safe to assume that like any villain has redeemable qualities at this point. So. They're
Um,
not good. They're not
but
good people. They're not to be idolized,
no,
or they are fucked up like child killers. Like obviously you don't need that in your life, but still.
no, they're definitely not. There's no saving them, but
No.
just to say that someone's evil for the sake of being evil is a very one-dimensional way of looking at a character.
Yep, I
Uh,
totally agree.
and if they're written that way, then that's just bad writing.
Yep.
But
You can almost point that to any villain, man. Any villain has redeemable qualities, man. Like to Voldemort in Harry Potter, man. To even Sauron in Lord of the Rings, I bet has redeemable qualities if you've read the books and everything and go through it all. And I bet every
I mean,
single like
even Frieza has redeeming qualities to him.
yeah,
You don't look at him that way ever. Even Hunted has redeeming qualities.
I know, right? And he's not even a villain. He's just in his own arc, right?
But I mean, Frieza, when he don't destroy every planet he goes to. He conquers some of them, and that means the people that were still there that didn't fight might get to live.
That's true.
So he could. I mean, that's not a great thing, no,
I
but
mean,
it
from what I've seen, Frieza only conquers and destroys the people who try to fight back. If you like submit to him, he won't actually hurt you. He'll just enslave you, which I don't know if that's any better, but it is a redeemable quality, I would say.
yeah, because he could just wipe out the planet and just take the planet and repopulate it with whatever he wanted.
Pretty much. But to be fair, even when he did wipe out the Saiyans, it was on Beerus's order. It wasn't on it wasn't his choice. It was Beerus. It was under Beerus's order. So,
Mhm.
I mean, we're
Oh,
getting so
but
off topic at this point, but still.
well, no, we're kind of talking about we're still on the primary topic, which is whether a villain needs to be looked at from a the way this guy's saying it or not, I guess. I mean, because
I
even with
think it's
this
like,
guy here,
mhm,
he he's not he's not good, obviously, but
obviously.
I could empathize with what he's doing based on what the games say. Now the books are different, and the movie is different.
Yeah,
Sure,
that's true. But
he's made out to be a completely different more of the person he is saying he is in those content.
yeah. But until the books and the movies are translated into the game, it's not canon. Like the books are canon unto themselves, the movie is canon unto itself, the games are canon unto themselves. It's just like how we have you have the Star Wars movies, you have the Star Wars, the Legend, and you have the new canon content in the books. Like it's all separate universes for a lot of things. So, and even within like the main and even within that, you still have the Star Wars what ifs, which are their own different alternate universes as well. So, like like every series, not every, but like a lot of series have this thing where it's separate in different ways. So,
Yep, and I mean, I just wanted to get your take on it. I wanted to give my opinion on it
mhm.
to the point of saying that, I mean, I just don't I think this guy's just reaching too far just to try to continue to further demonize some character that, yep, I'll be the one to say the thing he said not to say. It is a fictional character.
Yeah,
It has some real implications that could potentially trigger people in it because of what he does and what he's done.
yeah,
But there again, so has, like you've already said, Voldemort. Voldemort tried to kill a child.
yep. Twice? Well, 3 times. Sorry. Yeah.
Um, Worse things have happened in Star Wars,
Yep.
realistically.
hmm I mean,
Every Disney movie.
just like Darth Vader's own thing has been like that way. I think this guy is in a power struggle in his own mind over his own community. He is. You can hear it in his voice. Like he's like, "This is my community. I'm gonna do what the fuck I like." It's like, mate, if this is really a community, it's not a dictatorship. I'm just like, a community is meant to be something that is fairly, like fair across the entire board. If you are dictating that you cannot speak about something, how long is it going to be for you to be like, well, I don't like this theory, so I'm going to ban this theory. I don't like that theory, so I'm going to ban that theory. And then eventually you'll be down to where you can only talk about 2 or 3 different things.
Yeah. And that's like saying that, I mean, a lot of, I mean, just thinking about it, I can't think of anything that's got a villain in it that I couldn't find a redeeming quality for. I mean, hell, look at all the Disney movies. Every single
Yeah.
one of them.
But that's the point of Disney. Disney make their villains redeemable because, like, that's how you make a good villain. Like, they have to have something you can relate to. Otherwise, it won't work that well. I mean, I'm trying to think of
Yeah.
one. Maybe the Xenomorph in Alien is the only unredeemable villain that I can think of.
But that's because it's more of it's a predatory animal, more or less.
It is, but it's still unredeemable. It's still like its only purpose is to attack and kill and to feed and to like it doesn't have like an upside to it. It is a like ravenous creature wanting to destroy you. Like it is like it doesn't have that redeemable essence to it.
Mhm.
That's the only thing I can think of,
But yeah,
honestly.
but if this guy does happen to ever come across this, though, I mean, I'm not defending. I don't think Makai is either, but
Nope.
we're not, as far as I can say, we're not defending what the character was written to have done.
No.
But we are, I am at least saying, I won't speak for you, that it would be asinine to go out of your way to say that this character could not have had a good portion to their character that has been lost due to him being a villain.
What about Fred Krueger? He was a bad man and a bad villain. Like
Fred Krueger was a bad man and a bad villain, but he had a sympathetic start with the son of a hundred maniac.
that's true.
If
Like
you've seen, if you've watched back on all the, if you've seen all the movies where they showed his origin, he did have a sympathetic start.
that's true. I mean, I think everybody has the same start at the beginning, man. Like I've already said, like you have the Walter White thing, man, where you have the good for 3/4 of his life dies a villain. Like just the villain part is the bit where it's just like everybody has that kind of I say everybody, but generally speaking, like we can't think of many villains who don't have at least like something like. So like going back to things we already said, like Voldemort, his mum used a love potion in order to conceive him, which we think as like theorists think that that love potion like removed his emotion to love, and that's what caused Voldemort into being him. And then also being raised in an orphanage because his mum died once she stopped giving the love potion to his dad, and so on and such forth. Darth Vader had dreams given by Palpatine to think that his wife was going to die during childbirth. That's why he turned into Darth Vader and did what he did. Like, usually there's a push into that villainry. With this villain, it's losing his children. So, that initially got him to want to abduct kids, to want to, like, kill them and make them go into machines, and you know what I mean. So,
And again, this is obviously game continuity only.
yes. Just going by the game, just going by the lore you've spoken about, the lore that I've heard during what he's spoken about. I'm not an expert, as I've already stated. This is just my thoughts on, not just on this, but on like most things that work this way, from what I've had to.
Well, Hunted, since you're out there in the world, do you have an overall opinion yourself on Afton specifically? Get you in on this part of the conversation about whether you would believe he'd have anything redeeming to him, or if he just, as this guy says, just lost and villain from day one type thing here. Trying to watch what I
say. Go watch it.
Slightly.
Mm-hmm. I did say that, but I'm not. I'm just going full, like, fuck this shit, I'm just going to talk about it. Mostly. So.
Well, yeah, I'm just making sure I don't slip up and say something I can't.
Oh, yeah, I know, you're right. But no, it's a very interesting dichotomy between things, because you can see the people who view it as like a two-dimensional thing, and then also we're looking at it from a humanistic point of view, and then we're also looking at it from film continuity as well. But yeah, he seemed like he loved his kids to some degree, as Makai said. He wouldn't have tried to bring back anyone he hated.
Well, that basically, like you said, what you had alluded to, and I believe the same ultimate way, that because one thing he cleverly tried to omit from this, that only people that have played all the played or watched stuff with the games and accept the theories with the games will immediate red flags here, would be when the younger child, which is now known as Dave, which we haven't known that name for an exorbitant amount of time. That's not been the name the child was unnamed for a long time and might still not be the right name. But when they were bitten by Freddy, they were alive in a coma in a hospital for a while. And Afton, the last thing he said to that character was that I will put you back together again.
Yeah.
Which, why would he say that?
Because
why would he tell him he'd put him back together?
Because there's love there. There's a bond. Like, obviously, like, if you say that to somebody, that's literally, like, that shows care and love and affection, and it's fucked up the way he did it. Like, I'm not disputing any of that, but it shows that it's there in the initial processes. As, like, twisted as it became, it's still there.
Mm-hmm. Now, I will say that they did not... people might tell me, well, how would he know he could put him back together if that child was the first one that had died?
He didn't. He
well,
found
there's
a way.
A reason.
I would say
there's a reason for that. I mean, even in my own headcanon theoretics here, because we're never given the dates on this stuff. Never. The child was alive for a while in the hospital after being bitten by Fredbear. Elizabeth could have died and possessed baby while that child was still in the hospital.
That's true.
And then he would know that there's something to go on. And then when the child is fixing to pass, he tells him he's going to put him back together. So, but he was basically brain dead in the hospital.
I gotcha.
None of that's confirmed. That's just me saying that from the fact that both of those events did happen very close together, supposedly.
This is just your own headcanon. This is just kind of where you place it in your own.
And that's what this is, and that's what this, but that's what this franchise is for, is for people to do what I'm doing right there.
Yep.
is to come out and try to figure all that out that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have all the other stuff to look at to see if what I'm saying there lines up,
Gotcha.
and it may not. But I'm just saying that he does, excluding all of that, he does tell the child that he's going to put him back together. So there's no reason to tell someone something like that if you want them dead, unless this guy wants to say that he's wanting to torture his child by making him live in a fucking robot body, being terrified of robots his entire childhood. Now, if he wants to try that, then okay, I guess, but that just doesn't add up to me.
No, there's no point going through all that effort to do that. Because I mean, you'd have to go through so many things, kill so many, and do so many other things in order to do that. Like, if it's for something just to torture, is it really like? Would you really do that kind of effort just to like work that out and have to like bring them back? And because even then, like we said, like they could even come back, but they don't even remember what happened to them. They might not even remember that you're scared of robots by the time he comes back. So
Yeah.
So it's really hard to say. It's something that we can't answer like conclusively. We don't know. Like we're not in the mind of the creator. We have no idea. We are just theorizing. We're just giving
And
thoughts and processes and so
And Scott may never come out and say a lot of these answers. I mean, like I said, he does come out and derail certain theories that are too far off.
Yeah.
Or ask questions about why people haven't looked into one or two things.
Makes sense.
But he hasn't ever suggested that Afton did not care about anything as far as children go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hell, the first line of animatronics, which the one on the screen there right now, that is one of the first lines, which was these ones that could be doubled up as a suit and a robot itself.
Mm-hmm.
Because Afton and his partner Henry, from what I understand, would at times play the characters to where they could walk around and mingle with the customers a little bit safer than the robot itself would.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of give that like a lure of safety in like a weird fucked up way. I know what you
mean. But granted, the design was extremely faulty, obviously, because I mean it's very weak security precautions on it for what it could do.
Yep.
But
to be fair, that was probably by design, considering the overall purpose of them. I would imagine it's by design eventually. So. But I don't know. I don't know the series well enough to really give like a full on like hypothesis on it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, he had. It was never stated why he decided to design them in that way. It may have been cheap. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. It's hard to say though. But yeah, I think like we've turned a 12-minute video into an hour and 17-minute video. So.
Well, that's something. But
I know, right?
You got anything in closing then?
But yeah,
about this?
I think I'll close it. Like, I think like we know your opinion pretty well. We know my opinion. We know Hunter's opinion. So I think we'll just say, yes, it's fucked up to do what he did. It's the most like heinous thing you could possibly potentially do. Like anything to do with children in that way is unredeemable. But just because somebody is unredeemable when they die or when they are at the height of their villainy does not make them overall a bad character throughout their entire life. It's only up until the moment that he committed that first heinous act is when he became a villain, in my opinion, anyway. I think that's the most important thing to remember. Nobody is born evil. We are all born neutral until the point we decide to go over the edge into something unredeemable at the end of the day. But yeah.
And in my closing on this, I'll just go as far as to say this is not an attack on this dude about his opinion. He's entitled to this opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more of me not liking the fact that he is simultaneously saying to me, from what I can hear, that you can have your opinion, but if your opinion doesn't match my opinion, don't put it on my forum.
Basically. And again, like, the Five Nights at Freddy's community is much bigger than this dude's forum, so I would
Yes.
say like just having one little forum gives you right over your forum, sure, but I imagine if this was me and I was like a neutral person interested in his forum specifically, I would leave it. Because I don't need that kind of dictatorship when I'm trying to theorize about stuff that he's showing that he doesn't quite understand what he's talking about, even just in this one video. So
he's trying to combine too many things into
exactly,
one thing, and
yeah.
you need to keep them separate.
You Hunted said it perfectly. I think this is the perfect way to end. So this guy is just mad about some dumb shit and how he's reaching hard to bend things his way. I think that's the exact definition of what he's doing. So
Yep,
but yeah,
I agree.
we're gonna call it here,
agree.
man. So that has been Kai. I have been Makai.
And
Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week with I don't know what, but hopefully something more Halloweeny and horror-y. Like we're starting with Five Nights at Freddy's. We're gonna see where we go from here.
before we, if you got any suggestions for us about what to cover, just throw something in there somewhere.
Drop us a
Whether
comment.
Hunter, you got something or comment or something.
Yeah, whether it's a comment or on Spotify or YouTube or even on Discord, man, just come jump onto my Discord and we can chat. Either way, man, it doesn't matter to me. Thank you for watching. It's been fun. It's gone quickly for I didn't expect to push a 12-minute video to this, but you know what? We did good. And you have a wonderful day, everybody.